Imagine for a second that you are dead. You are 6 feet under, and sitting right next to your skull is a severed human foot, a board game, and 50 empty tortoise shells. You did not put them there. Your friends did. For thousands of years, humans had been burying their loved ones with incredibly bizarre objects that make zero logical sense today. Why would anyone pack these exact items for eternity? If you crack open a history book, the standard answer always sounds incredibly polite. Historians will tell you that ancient humans put strange things in graves because they wanted to honor the dead, or because they believed in a beautiful, peaceful afterlife. But when you actually look at the physical items pulled out of the dirt, that polite story falls apart immediately. The objects our ancestors shoved into the ground next to rotting corpses do not look like loving farewell gifts. They look like survival gear. They look like weapons. And in many cases, they look like desperate, terrifying security systems. To understand what was actually going through the minds of ancient people when they packed a suitcase for a corpse, you have to completely forget how we view death today. Today, we treat death like a final sleep. You close your eyes, the screen goes black, and it is over. But for most of human history, death was not the end of the road. It was just a highly aggressive change of address. The afterlife was viewed as a physical, geographical place. It was a tangible dimension with roads, rivers, monsters, and a highly complex bureaucracy. You did not just drift off into the clouds as a glowing spirit. You woke up in the dirt, in a new and highly dangerous environment, and you had to immediately get to work. That is why the ancient Egyptians buried their dead with a board game. If you dig up a high-status Egyptian tomb, you will frequently find an ornate, rectangular wooden box with 30 squares carved into the top, accompanied by a set of playing pieces. The game is called Senet. For a long time, archaeologists assumed this was just a nice way to kill time. They figured eternity was a long time to sit in the dark, so a board game made sense as a casual form of entertainment. But as researchers translated the hieroglyphics and studied the Book of the Dead, they realized Senet was not Monopoly. It was not a game. It was a metaphysical cheat code. The Egyptians believed that the moment you died, your soul had to navigate a terrifying obstacle course to reach the eternal paradise of the Field of Reeds. This journey was packed with literal demons, lakes of fire, and divine judges who wanted to eat your heart. The board game Senet was a miniature, physical simulation of that exact journey. The 30 squares represented the path through the underworld. Playing the game while you were alive was practice, but putting the game inside the grave with the corpse was a way to guarantee the dead person had the instruction manual when they woke up. It was a map hidden in plain sight. They were not burying their loved ones with a toy to keep them entertained. They were sneaking a cosmic survival guide across the border of death, so their friend would not be annihilated by a jackal-headed god. But a board game is at least recognizable to us. It makes a bizarre kind of sense once you understand the rules. Things get infinitely more complicated when you rewind the clock to 12,000 years ago, long before the pyramids were even a thought, and look at a grave discovered in northern Israel. Scientists call it the Natufian shaman burial. When archaeologists carefully brushed the dirt away from this prehistoric woman's skeleton, they did not find gold, and they did not find weapons. They found a collection of items so incredibly specific and strange that it sounds like the ingredients for a nightmare. Pinned beneath her body was the pelvis of a leopard. Nearby was the severed wing of a golden eagle. Placed perfectly next to her was the tail of a wild cow. Lying close to her head was a severed human foot that belonged to an adult male who was significantly larger than she was, and surrounding her entire body, creating a physical wall around the corpse, were the shells of 50 wild tortoises. Every single one of these items was intentionally placed. This was not a trash pit, and it was not a random assortment of animal bones that washed into a cave. The people who buried her went to unimaginable lengths to gather these specific things. Think about the logistics of the tortoise shells alone. To acquire 50 intact tortoise shells in the prehistoric Middle East, this woman's tribe had to halt their daily survival routine, scatter into the wilderness, hunt down 50 individual tortoises, bring them back, kill them, roast them, eat all the meat, and clean the shells, all while a dead body was rapidly decomposing in the heat. It was a staggering expenditure of time and energy for a group of hunter-gatherers who had barely invented agriculture. So why do it? Why put a leopard pelvis and 50 empty turtle shells in a hole in the ground? Because for prehistoric humans, the strange things in graves were a cosmic ID card. In the animistic worldview of ancient tribes, every animal, rock, and river had a spirit, and the spirit world was incredibly crowded. When a powerful person like a shaman died, they were not just vanishing. They were crossing over to negotiate with the forces of nature on behalf of the living tribe. But the universe is a big place. How did the spirits know who just arrived? They know because you bring your credentials. The leopard pelvis, the eagle wing, the human foot. These were not random debris. They were a spiritual resume. The ancient tribe was physically attaching the power, speed, and vision of these apex predators to the shaman's soul. They were building her a suit of armor out of biology, so that when she woke up in the dark, she would be recognized as an absolute powerhouse. The strange things in her grave were carefully selected puzzle pieces meant to construct a supernatural avatar. But this is where our modern assumptions really start to get in the way. When we look at the Egyptian board game or the Natufian animal bones, we automatically project our own feelings onto the past. We assume that putting objects in a grave is fundamentally an act of love. We think of it like putting a teddy bear on a child's grave, or burying a grandfather with his favorite watch. We assume grave goods are about taking care of the dead because we miss them. But the historical record points to a much darker, much more pragmatic truth. For a massive chunk of human history, people did not put strange things in graves out of love. They did it out of pure, unadulterated fear. If you view the dead not as peaceful spirits, but as confused, powerful, and potentially angry entities waking up in a dark box, the entire logic of grave goods flips upside down. Suddenly, putting someone's favorite items in their grave is not a sweet gesture of remembrance. It is a hostage negotiation. Throughout antiquity, there was a widespread and deeply ingrained belief that the dead were incredibly petty. If you died, and you woke up in the afterlife, and you realized your family had kept your favorite hunting spear, your best jewelry, or your most comfortable clothes, you were going to be furious. And an angry ghost was not just a spooky campfire story. It was an explanation for real-world catastrophe. If a plague hit the village, or the crops failed, or a child died in the night, ancient humans did not blame microbes or weather patterns. They blamed the guy they buried last Tuesday, who was probably pissed off that they kept his favorite sandals. Therefore, burying people with their belongings was a highly calculated bribe. It was a way of paying the dead to stay dead. You put the strange, heavy, valuable things in the dirt, not because you wanted to honor the corpse, but because you wanted the corpse to leave you alone. You gave them their stuff, so they would have absolutely no excuse to come back to the house looking for it. And once you realize that ancient humans were terrified of the dead returning, the strange things found in graves suddenly look a lot less like luggage for a journey, and a lot more like a maximum security prison. If you travel to specific medieval and post-medieval graveyards in Eastern Europe, particularly in Poland, you will find graves that are completely devoid of gold, board games, or animal bones. Instead, you will find bodies that have been physically sabotaged. Archaeologists frequently uncover skeletons with massive, heavy bricks shoved violently into their jaws. They find bodies pinned to the earth with iron spikes driven through their legs. And most famously, they find corpses with heavy iron farming scythes placed directly across their necks, with the sharp edge resting right against the throat. Modern media loves to call these vampire burials, but the people digging these graves were not thinking about Hollywood monsters. They were dealing with a very practical, terrifying problem. They genuinely believed that certain corpses were going to try to dig their way out of the dirt and walk back into town. Maybe the person died of a sudden, mysterious illness. Maybe they were an outsider. Maybe they were just the first person to die in a local epidemic, and the terrified villagers needed a reason for why the sickness was spreading. Whatever the trigger, the community decided this specific body was a flight risk. The strange things put in these graves were purely mechanical solutions to a supernatural problem. A heavy rock shoved in the mouth was designed to physically weigh the head down and stop the corpse from chewing its way out of the shroud. The iron scythe placed over the throat was a brutally brilliant piece of passive security. If the corpse remained still, nothing happened. But if the dead person magically reanimated and tried to sit up, they would drive their own neck directly into the sharp iron blade and decapitate themselves. They didn't use complex spells. They didn't rely on prayers. They used farming equipment and gravity. They looked at a dead body, decided it was a threat, and rigged the grave like a booby trap. Whether it was a magical map to outsmart Egyptian demons, a suit of animal armor for a prehistoric shaman, a bribe to keep a ghost happy, or an iron blade to cut a zombie's head off, every strange object ever placed in the dirt served the exact same fundamental purpose. Today, we still put things in graves. We bury people with their wedding rings, with family photographs, with letters they can never read, and with flowers that will rot in a matter of days. We know, logically and scientifically, that the dead do not need these things. We know they cannot see the photos or read the letters, yet we still do it, driven by an instinct that is tens of thousands of years old. and that is because the strange things in graves were never actually about the dead. A rotting corpse has no use for a tortoise shell, and a skeleton cannot play a board game. Putting objects into the earth is, and always has been, a psychological tool for the living. It is the only way a fragile, terrified human mind can stand at the edge of a bottomless hole and assert some tiny, fleeting illusion of control over the one thing we absolutely cannot control.